In the comment section on the last YouTube, someone said, JD said, I have a question that's being repeated by many people. When is Kent going to stop running from further discussions with Aron Ra? First place, I'm not running from it, and it wasn't a discussion. He is a bully. He interrupts.
No, I don't bully people. While there is no question but that Hovind is definitely weaker than I am, even in the very fields where he claims expertise, I do not use my strengths to intimidate him, nor do I think that would even work against his level of apparent narcissism. If you watch that discussion, you'll see that he was all about posturing, bluffing, and puffing up. In that discussion, he agreed live on video that he would come back for a second round, but he went back on his word as soon as he was off the air. That's why they say he was running.
I'm going to make an offer now. Aron, pay close attention. Kent's perfectly happy debating laymen YouTubers on his own terms multiple times. However, when he's confronted with someone who has actual expertise, I'm not sure what Aron's expertise is, discussion that takes away all his rhetorical power, he cowers.
Hovind doesn't know what my expertise is? This coming from the guy who declared himself to be an expert on dinosaurs and the Bible, without any justification whatsoever, and despite a decades-long continuous display of such famously shameless incompetence as to be a laughable example of the Dunning-Kruger effect? I don't claim to be an expert like he does, but I've forgotten more about evolution than he'll ever know, and I will continue to demonstrate how I am far more adept at this than he ever could be.
I am willing to debate, very much. Aron did not want to do a debate, because then you have to follow certain rules, like don't interrupt. That's why he didn't want the debate, okay?
I only agreed to do it if it was not billed as a debate, partly because I didn't want to lend legitimacy to a convicted fraud, and partly because I know how Kent plays this game. I've seen him tell more lies in one sentence than there are words in that sentence, once you factor in all the misconceptions and misrepresentations within that. So if you let him go for 20 minutes or more uninterrupted, it would be impossible to correct every falsehood he just spilled forth. It's a common creationist tactic called the Gish gallop, named after Duane Gish of the Institute for Creation Research. To counter that, I'd first need to explain why Kent is wrong before I can explain the correction, which is usually complex, requiring more explanation, such that both of those steps take longer than it does for Kent to spit out his childish misunderstanding that he's so proud of. It takes at least 4 times longer to correct any of these lies than it does for him to tell them. That's why he wants equal time, so that his errors will go uncorrected. It's not about truth, it's about appearances. Knowing this, I wanted our exchange to be billed as a discussion instead, so that when he brings up his 6 levels of cosmic, organic, and chemical evolution that he made up, for example, I could nip that in the bud and keep this talk focused on what evolution really is and not the straw man parody that Hovind wants to make it out to be.
In my first and only discussion I've ever had with him.
So it is a discussion again? But I thought you just said...
It wasn't a discussion. On the Non Sequitur show, I was promised equal time, yet someone who followed the program went through and counted the minutes and said he got 62 minutes to talk and I got 36, and he interrupted me 288 times during that show. He saw that, the Aron Ra thing, okay?
I had to keep interrupting him because Hovind could not understand the one question I had to keep repeating. He kept running off on other tangents to avoid it. But he was not promised equal time in any of the written negotiations I've seen, except for our opening statements. That's it.
The Bible says, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou be like unto him. And then it says, answer a fool according to his folly. So it looks like you got a choice if you want to answer a fool or not answer a fool.
Well, at least Hovind admits that the Bible contradicts itself, because it is just the words of mere fallible men, after all. But of course I am not a fool. A fool is one who too readily believes improbable claims from questionable sources on insufficient evidence. That's Hovind and his followers, not me. I am answering a fool, but I don't need permission from his silly folklore to do that, and I'm not doing it according to his folly, either. When he wants to pretend that evolution teaches we came from rocks, or that Lucy was just a chimpanzee, or when he goes on about his dog kinds, I'm going to correct all that folly. I just hope he keeps it down to a few points per response, because the more mistakes he makes, the more I'll have to correct.
Bible says, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. I would consider him an angry man and a furious man, and I'll still try to be his friend, still try to win him to the Lord, but I'm going to be cautious, okay, after the last one.
So Hovind is going to disobey his God and make friends with me anyway? Remember that in our last discussion, he called me stupid. He accused me of being drunk, and he tried to correct me on my own vocation, which he showed he doesn't know anything about, apart from what he might have seen on Wikipedia a moment earlier. He was very rude and condescending, and his hypocrisy is showing, but I'm a sweetheart, and I can be a bucket of chuckles. The only thing I hate is lies and liars, and that's why Hovind will never be my friend. It's not just that he's delusional, it's that he's so dishonest about it. And just to clarify before I'm accused of ad hominem, it's not just Hovind. It is impossible for anyone to defend creationism honestly, not against someone who knows both sides of this dispute as well as I do.
So, for the record, I am not the least bit afraid of Aron or any atheist, and I will cheerfully defend the Bible position of creation against any number of atheists if I get half the time and we discuss one topic at a time. Now, in light of his last performance and failure to abide by simple rules,
your rules were never applied in that discussion.
Here is my offer, Aron, and all of you other atheists that want to, that you said I'm not running from a debate from him. Are you kidding? Aron will make a video of his best 3 evidences for evolutionism. Aron, what's the best 3 evidences you know of to support evolutionism?
None. There's no such thing as evolutionism. Kant calls anyone who accepts mainstream science an evolutionist because he wants to establish the fallacy of false equivalence by pretending that science is a religion too. I don't know how improving our understanding of reality is somehow more dangerous than believing in evil spirits, spells, and curses, but that's what he thinks. At least he realizes how bad religions are. And Kant is fond of repeating the lie that
the evolution theory is the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the history of the world.
But, as I have explained to him before, every religion, commonly accepted as such by both its adherents and critics, is a faith-based belief system positing the notion that a supernatural essence of self somehow survives the death of the physical body to continue on in some other form. That's what a religion is, because that's what all religions are. But that doesn't apply to evolution or any other aspect of science either. Even the standard definition shows that evolution is not a religion, and Kant knows it's not. But he is not in the habit of correcting or even acknowledging his own mistakes, because that's all he has. If you can't dazzle him with brilliance, baffle him with bullshit. That's his game. He doesn't have any actual truth, and he doesn't even know what truth is, which is sad. Beware of false knowledge. It is much more dangerous than ignorance.
I will play the video in its entirety. Unless there's profanity, I will edit that out. But as long as you can talk without cursing, which I don't know if you can, but if you can.
Gosh darn it to heck, how am I supposed to argue with this Fargan bastard?
But I will play the video in its entirety, but I will hit pause and interject my comments as needed. So we will then supply an edited video. It'll be his comments on the proof for evolution with my interjections as often as necessary. Aron may then get his second chance to speak and re-edit the video. Don't leave out anything I say, but he's going to want to pause in the middle of my talking and interject his comments and send it back to me. I will then get my second chance to edit in any comments needed, and we will publish the video. We both get 2 chances at this. You give your best 3 evidences, I'll counter, but I don't want any interruptions at all, okay? And then you can do it in your studio without any interruptions from me, and then I will do it, and we will publish it. Each of us will be allowed to post it and share it and copy it and sell it if we choose, with no royalty due to the other party. Simple enough?
What Hovind is proposing is essentially a written debate, which I'm delighted to accept, because that's the way scientific debates are done, where we can check each other's sources before we reply. That also means that he can't do the Gish gallop. Of course, that's why he's also demanding equal time and editorial control, but it doesn't work that way. Equal time doesn't apply in scientific debates. We can't have it anyway, not if he's going to enter as many interjections as necessary, which is how it should be. Because the truth matters, every error will be corrected, no matter how long that takes, though I will try to be as brief as I can be. Interruptions aren't even possible in this format, so I guess Hovind hadn't really thought this through. That's especially obvious when he says that we should talk about one thing at a time, which we should, yet at the same time he tells me to list 3 different lines of evidence at once. So we can't talk about one thing at a time, can we? I'm not going to keep my video unlisted and let him edit it twice before anyone sees it. There's no reason to do that, and there are good reasons not to. Why would I? So he can sell copies? I'm a YouTuber on Patreon. I'm not peddling DVDs like it's 1999, and I wouldn't go into any partnership with that snake oil salesman anyway. So I will send him the video link after it is published for all to see, and he's welcome to do the same thing in reply. This also enables the audience to determine a winner themselves rather than have him simply declaring victory in his final edit before sending it to his misinformed donors. This reminds me of the time that Hovind offered $250,000 for evidence of evolution. And that means that if I show a body of objectively verifiable facts that are positively indicative of or exclusively concordant with that position, which is what evidence is, of which I have volumes, then he'd have to give me $250,000, right? But if you tried to collect that prize, the next page said that he wouldn't actually accept anything that would qualify as evidence of evolution. Instead, he demanded proof that God couldn't have done it. So we have to assume that a God even exists, in which case he has unlimited magic. So the offer was just a dishonest bait-and-switch scam all along, done as a publicity stunt so that believers could say, "See, no one answered Hovind's challenge." I remember another debate that Hovind had where his opponent accurately guessed what evidence Hovind would ask for, so that upon demand his interlocutor produced a printed stack of peer-reviewed articles. Hovind literally did a hand-waving dismissal, looked away and said, "That's not evidence, that's just a bunch of paper." That's how dishonest Hovind is. And that's why he's not to be trusted to set the parameters of our debate. If Hovind wants to debate science, he's going to have to follow certain rules. One of them being that, of course, peer-reviewed articles reflect actual research experiments that really do qualify as evidence, regardless how much religious make-believers want to pretend otherwise. Another rule is that he doesn't get to redefine scientific terms in ways other than mainstream academic science uses those terms. And I have to stress that because creationists depend on equivocation along with a host of other fallacious arguments. There's no great skill involved in refusing to be reasoned with, which is what it means to be irrational. The general public viewing our exchange will see every round of this debate, and the winner will be clear, even if I don't declare it and he refuses to admit it. He said not to delete anything he says, which is fair, but I trust that I don't have to keep everything he said in his challenge video, because that was nearly 40 minutes long and only about 6 minutes of that had anything to do with me, so I cut out all the irrelevant bits, including him reading from my Wikipedia page, except that I do have to comment on this.
It says he studied paleontology at Dallas. I don't know what that means for sure. He walked onto the campus and picked up a rock. It doesn't say which campus. I studied paleontology in 37 countries in all 50 states. I have studied lots of things in all those states. Okay.
Notice, Hovind claims to have studied paleontology in 37 countries, but we have no reason to believe that he ever attended any classes in any of them, and we know he didn't. He is the one who only walked onto a campus and picked up rocks. Making false assumptions about every pile of dirt you happen to see is not the same thing as formally studying a field that he obviously knows nothing at all about. Apart from believing that the Earth is only 6,000 years old and thinking that carbon-14 is used on Mesozoic fossils, Hovind also thinks that reptiles never stop growing and that dinosaurs are just modern lizards that lived too long and got real big, and that plesiosaurs had cartilaginous skeletons, even when other creationists correct him on these things. So he has absolutely no paleontological comprehension or education whatsoever. Even without graduating, I have better credentials than he has. At least my Associates of Science degree is real. I'm also a reverend, like he is, albeit for a better religion. And he got his doctorate the same way I got my ordination. He bought his PhD from a mail order and didn't know he was even supposed to have a thesis first until he already had his followers calling him doctor. He's not a doctor. He's a charlatan. Yet he calls into question that I actually studied biology, historical geology, and paleontology along with taxonomy at the University of Texas at Dallas. That means I'm taking classes with actual professors and working as a scientist both in the lab and in the field, not just pretending to know everything already like he does. But the way he spins it, my education can't measure up to his complete lack of any relevant training. Hovind says he was a high school science teacher for 15 years, but he's never worked in any high school. Instead, what he did was go into churches on occasion to lie to homeschool students about the pseudoscience nonsense he believes in. I make educational videos for high school kids, so I could call myself a high school teacher with more justification than he has. But if I did that, it'd be just as dishonest as every time he did that.
If you so choose, Aron, after to continue this discussion.
I thought this was going to be a debate and our previous meeting was a discussion.
Then you can make another video of your next best 3 evidences for evolution. And we'll do the same thing again.
I don't think we'll get that far. I think Hovind is going to faceplant on the very first round like he did in our previous meeting, because he can't get through this knowing as little as he does, especially not when he has to follow the same rules that I do. And now that we got the preliminaries out of the way, I guess the debate starts now.
Aron said, no matter how positively you think you know it, if you can't show it, then you don't know it. And you shouldn't say that you do. Aron, I'd like you to follow your own advice. I've been asking here, can you show me the evidence for how any of these things evolved? Where, not a line on paper, where's the evidence? How did we get butterflies from nothing? How did we get broccoli from nothing, or a bear, or a backbone? Go back and look at the videos.
Only creationists believe that complex interdependent systems and organisms poofed out of nothing. Remember that evolution is summarily defined as descent with inherent modification, meaning genetic modification, variable allele frequencies at the population level. I've seen you say that you accept that this happens, and that you even accept speciation, though of course you don't realize that counts as macroevolution. You even accept ring species, which opposes and refutes your own notion of created kinds. To answer your question, butterflies are modified moths. The evidence of their evolution includes comparative morphology. For example, nearly 250,000 lepidopterans, but less than 50,000 of them are butterflies, and all of them follow the moth template. And then, of course, we have genetic sequencing to determine their familial relationship. As this article explains, that's easier than it used to be, because we can get reliable data sets in mere months, but it can take years to train researchers to be proficient in morphological character analysis. Broccoli is a human invention, exploiting evolutionary mechanisms in agriculture by selective breeding and to derive broccoli and cauliflower out of an early form of kale. How did you not know this already? You think this is inexplicable? What would it take to get you to admit this mistake? And sadly, you think that anything that science can't explain is somehow explained by your God's magic? But that's not true either. You have to justify your position. You also mentioned bears, which are closely related to both dogs and seals. And not only do we have fossil transitions for bears becoming seals, but prior to that, we also have bear dogs and dog bears showing their divergence in the fossil record. Then, on top of that, we even have genome sequence, comparative analysis, and haplotype structure of the domestic dog, which links them not just to other breeds of dogs, but to other species of dogs that can't interbreed and would therefore be different kinds in your illusion. This same genetic study also links dogs to bears as well as seals. And then we have additional genetic evidence in a molecular phylogeny of the Carnivora, linking all Canoidea and Phylloidea. So none of these things came from nothing. Multiple lines of evidence indicate that they all came from prior forms via a mechanism of population genetics that you already accept as legitimate and that we've been using throughout agriculture since the dawn of civilization. I also explained the evolution of the backbone very briefly in my video on olfactors, craniates, and vertebrates, which should have been 3 videos really. The summary is that bony vertebrae developed from a buildup of calcium deposits in what was a cartilaginous skeleton. Vertebrates inherited an increasingly ossified version of that same structure. This is how osteichthyes diverged from chondrichthyes. And some of the evidence of that is taxonomic, where some of the most primitive lobed-finned or lunged fishes, like polypteriforms for example, have substantially less calcium in their skeletons than typical teleos and certainly tetrapods. This hypothetical was predicted by the theory and later confirmed in support of the theory, so that counts as evidence too.
You said no matter how positively you think you know it, if you can't show it, then you don't know it. Aron, you don't know evolution is true. You can't show it. You can't show it on any of the items. I'm on number 44 or 45 tonight.
I've already shown it on each of the examples you just mentioned. Should I refer you to my series on the systematic classification of life? Because I just uploaded episode number 35, which talks about the 4 eutherian superorders and how these were genetically identified and how the molecular clock determines this divergence to have occurred just over 98 million years ago. I guarantee that my series has more substance than any or all of yours.
You can imagine it.
You can imagine it. Yeah, we got to get the rainbow. Imagine you're going to do a rainbow for me. Oh, you editors, okay. So I would like to know. Go back and watch my videos and show me to answer my questions.
Maybe I should. I could make a career out of correcting you. This would be just like my series on David C. Pack. But you think I have to imagine evolution? This reminds me of when you said that evolution was a fairy tale for grown-ups. But a fairy tale is a fable with a moral and folklorish elements like witches, wizards, giants and dragons, curses and blessings, which are both magical enchantments, and animals that talk and act like human beings. So even if the Bible were true, which can't be, it would still be a fairy tale by definition. But that doesn't apply at all to evolution. So that's just another one of your lies, the fallacy of projection. Which brings me to the 3 lines of evidence in support of evolution that you asked for. The first of them is the fact that evolution happens, that biodiversity and complexity do increase naturally as alleles vary in increasing distinction in reproductive populations, where beneficial mutations do occur and are inherited by descendant sets, and that variation is accelerated in genetically isolated groups. You don't need faith to believe that, because natural selection, sexual selection, and genetic drift have all been proven to have predictable effect in guiding this variance. We can show evolution. We know that evolution happens. Microevolution and macroevolution have both been directly observed and documented dozens of times, both in the lab and in naturally controlled conditions in the field. You don't have to make believe. You're free to doubt and then confirm that beyond reasonable doubt. My second fact in evidence in support of evolution is taxonomy. That was the first indication of evolution and still the most compelling, especially now that it's a twin-nested hierarchy, where what had been determined by physical characteristics is now confirmed genetically. Because as the 18th century creationist who discovered it realized, it shows a relationship between all living things that contradicts creationism and that only evolution could eventually account for. Note that cladistic phylogenetic systematics is not drawing lines on paper like you made it out to be. Instead, it's enveloping categories based on diagnostic characteristics, because evolution at every level is just a matter of incremental, usually subtle, superficial changes being slowly compiled atop successive tiers of fundamental similarities, and these tiers of similarity establish taxonomic clades. For that reason, evolution adheres to the laws of monophyly and biodiversity. So there can never be a change between kinds, and there's no such thing as a kind anyway. Because again, it is a fact that birds are a subset of dinosaurs in the same way that humans are a subset of apes, primates, eutherian mammals, and vertebrate deuterostome animals. There's no faith required in any of this. We can prove it all. And my third line of evidence supporting evolution is that we don't just have a mechanism that we know actually works, even under direct observation and manipulation if we want to. And we don't just have a phylogeny that we can verify with fossils, morphology, physiology, embryology, and genetics. We also have an actual theory, something creationism doesn't have and can't even comprehend. A body of knowledge with profound explanative power that has withstood more and harsher critical analysis than any other theory, and yet it still has never failed or been contradicted. If you're going to disprove or refute any scientific theory, much less the best supported theory in all of science, you're going to have to cough up your own theory to replace it. That's one of the rules of science. To qualify, your hypothesis will have to be effectively proven in the sense that it has to make testable predictions that are potentially falsifiable, and it has to account for all the data better than the current theory already does, and it has to withstand a battery of critical tests indefinitely and without fail. Good luck with that.
I've been pointing out that there's a lot of things it is not possible to explain how they evolved.
Oh, it's easy to explain how all these things evolved. And now we can even test that objectively. But what you can't explain is how anything was created, because magic isn't an explanation of anything. You're not going to be able to employ the fallacies of argument from ignorance, or God of the gaps, or shifting the burden of proof, or false dichotomy, or the circular argument routing back to the assumed conclusion. Yours is not the default position. Yours is an extraordinary claim of impossible nonsense lacking any reason to believe it. So you're going to have to show evidence for your position as I do mine, which means you're going to have to answer all the same questions that I do and show that your answers are supported the way I must also. So if you want to pretend that bears or broccoli or anything else was magically poofed out of thin air, then you have a lot of physical and molecular evidence to dispute, and you're going to need to cite legitimate peer-reviewed science to do that. To start with, let me remind you of the phylogeny challenge. Watch that video so you'll understand why it's important, and then pay attention to the few series of simple yes or no questions therein regarding panthers and ducks and varanids. Just tell me where in each inquiry you answered no. It's that easy. Then we'll see how you are unable to justify or explain your position the way I definitely can.